Hello, my name is Eliza. I'm a survivor advocate for those affected by human trafficking, and I am also a survivor of human trafficking. And welcome to my podcast. Today, we have an incredible guest. And before we get going, and I've never said anything like this before in my podcast, and I probably should have, some of the topics that we discuss on my podcast can get a little bit heavy. As some of you folks know, I have a lot of amazing guests on, but sometimes some of the subject matters can get heavy. One other issue that I've never brought up before is that I have had survivors on my podcast that haven't identified as survivors on my podcast. It's just not where they're at in their journey. But I try to just showcase folks that I really think are interesting and that I really want to speak to. The woman that we have on today got on my radar. I've always listened to the Sam Harris podcast. And this woman literally gave me a whole new perspective on an issue that I had never really thought about in this way. Her name is Yasmine Mohammed. She is the author of the book Unveiled: How Western Liberals Empower Radical Islam. That kind of says a lot right there. Her story will completely captivate you. And I definitely recommend you check out her book and her work. She's going to go through talking about probably a little bit more about her work, because I definitely want to showcase that. But without further ado, Yasmine Mohammed, thank you so much for coming on my podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, you're just freaking awesome. I mean, I've always listened to Sam Harris podcast, even when he went full TDS. I still love them for some reason. You know what I mean? And it's funny because some of my homies are like, oh, don't, I don't know why you listen to Sam. He just has a special place in my heart. You're one of those reasons that he has a special place in my heart at a time when having you on was probably extremely contentious. He gave you, well, you were already sort of dipping your toes in the pond as far as being in public, but that was a very powerful interview. And I've heard quite a few powerful interviews that you've done since then. I had never heard someone with your perspective before, which I don't know if that's good or bad. I think you always have to hear something for the first time. Without going too in depth, because I'd rather folks just check out your book by going through your whole story. In a nutshell, if you could tell folks maybe why would Sam Harris have had you on?
Well, Sam was the catalyst for me doing anything, like for me sitting here speaking to you today. So he's the catalyst. He's the reason why I wrote my book. He did a interview on Bill Maher with Ben Affleck. It was this infamous episode where
very infamous.
Yeah. Where basically Bill Maher and Sam were talking about how, in the West, liberal-minded people, left-leaning people seem to betray the values of liberalism or betray progressive values when it comes to people living in the Muslim world. And they brought up a few different examples, but one of the examples that they brought up in their conversation was that in Egypt, close to 90% of people in Egypt believe that those who denounce Islam should be executed. Now, that was me. They were speaking to me. There's these two men on American television. I've been watching Bill Maher since I was a teenager, and he's talking about me because my family is from Egypt, and I hadn't identified as a Muslim at that point for over a decade. And it was a very, it's a very well-guarded secret, because the response from the Muslim community is, that you should now be killed. And so that was what the response was from even my own family. And so when Bill and Sam were having this conversation, of course, Ben Affleck jumps in with his roid rage.
Yeah, that was quite the scene.
Yeah, you're gross and racist and blah, blah, blah. And he shut down the conversation. So that's the subtitle of my book right there: How Western Liberals Empower Radical Islam.
Sorry, go ahead. Finish. Sorry.
Yeah. So Bill and Sam were just trying to speak up against radical Islam. And then you have Ben Affleck jumping in and essentially shutting down the conversation. And by doing that, he is empowering this tyranny to continue because he doesn't want, this is the same guy that did a movie called Dogma, which he was very happy criticizing dogma in Christianity or in any other, contexts. But when it comes to Muslims, all of a sudden that's racist. And so that was the reason why I started to write my book, because the next day on my Facebook was covered with friends who were essentially, so happy that Ben Affleck was there to shut down these gross and racist men. And I was like, what? Like, how are we having such completely different perspectives of the exact same episode? And so that's when I realized, okay, this is on me. I'm the one who has been so scared of telling my story because I didn't want it to get through the grapevine and get back to my family or get back to my daughter's father. He's a member of Al-Qaeda. He was in Egypt, in prison in Egypt, but it's Al-Qaeda. It's a huge network. I didn't know where his friends were. So I was very, very quiet about my background. But then that day I realized I have to speak up. I have to do something. And that's when I started writing my book.
I think that's so powerful and interesting. I love that you decided to. So many people these days want to sit back and point the finger or sit back and wait for somebody else to, pick up the sword. And you saw it and you were like, no, it's my time. And your story is not an easy one to tell. There's a lot of, it's funny when I look at your life and zoom out, I'm like, wow, Yasmine has had literally like 4 or 5 different whole lives packed into one life. So many different lives. And last night when I was tweeting about you, I'm just grateful that you made it out alive. And also one thing that's always stood out to me about you is that you have a great sense of humor. You don't take yourself too seriously, and you are, you take the issue seriously, but you are willing to laugh. And the other thing I love about you, Yasmine, is that you, from a distance, I always see you pop up in place with a nuanced take. You're willing to see different sides. With your book, how do you identify politically? And I don't want to stay here for too long because I personally don't care too much about politics, but just because that's a direct dig in the title against liberals. How do you identify politically? There's no right or wrong answer. You're not going to offend me.
Well, the problem is that changes. At the time when I wrote the book, I was sort of doing the Dave Rubin classical liberal. That's where I felt like I belonged. And so when I'm criticizing liberals, it's like my fellow liberals. Things have gone off the rails since then. And it's just been pulled so like the left has just pulled so far to the left that I don't know where I belong on I don't even know what the spectrum looks like at this point. It's I can't say that I belong in any political group because I don't. Like it depends on the issue. Like you said, the reason why you keep on seeing nuanced takes from me is because I'm forcing myself to do that. Like, I'm like, okay, I have to step back. It's kind of like after you have been part of a cult where you have been told what to think about everything and everything is black and white and everything is right and wrong, you tend to not trust. Like, it's very difficult to trust your judgment after that, like your immediate response to something, your gut response. You have to sit with it and think about it and try and remove emotion and compare it to other things and push you know what I mean? Like, I do that a lot.
I know exactly. Because I think I do something very similarly. I really do. And it's difficult to pull yourself out of it, especially when it directly impacts you or hits close to home. When it's somebody else's issue, it's a little easier. But for instance, anytime a comedian makes jokes about human trafficking, it tries to belittle it. I have to like legit pull my whole like pull my whole self out and remain consistent. And that's where sort of I go back to core principles. Like what are my core
Yes.
principles? My core principle is free speech. So that means all speech, even speech I don't like or jokes I don't think are funny. Do you find that you're somebody with strong core principles after leaving an
Islam.
abuser, leaving an
Mhm.
do you consider Islam an abuser?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And do you consider, how about the government? Do you look at the government? Because you're not American necessarily. Do you look at governments as abusers or specific governments only?
I think that governments have a great potential to abuse. I have lived under abusive governments. I think that I am Canadian, and so I think that we made the international stage recently with, the example of how a government can very quickly turn, authoritarian, therefore abusive, dominating,
For someone that lived under, because you were in Egypt, right? I want to make sure.
Mhm.
So you lived in Egypt. That's a tyrannical government, especially for women.
Mhm.
How did what started happening in Canada? How did that make you feel as someone that lived under a more oppressive regime? Did it start to set off some red
Yes.
flag?
And I think that's, and you're going to relate to this too. Like once you have met darkness in your life, like once you've known a psychopath, once you've experienced the darkness of that humanity is capable of, it's always a possibility. So you don't get to live like a lot of people that have never experienced those things or that have never met those people. They get to live in a different world where those kinds of things are not a possibility. And I think that it wasn't just me, it was, other people from, Venezuela, China, all over the world. Like Canada is a very multicultural country, Russians, Ukrainians, like from all over, and Polish. I mean, I could go on and on, but they just immediately started to feel, this is triggering. I don't want my government. Canada is known for being a very free country. And we pride ourselves on that, and we love that. And it's almost like a confidence in the freedom that we have, that we don't even have to fight for it, as opposed to Americans, you wear it on your sleeve, like you're constantly, don't you forget, we're a free country. Whereas Canadians are just chill about it,
It's good and bad, right? We're like so extra about it.
I think it was New Hampshire where I was doing a talk with Dave Rubin at Dartmouth University, and the license plate said "Live free or die."
Right.
And I was like, oh man, like I love that. You don't need it anymore, but I love that energy is alive, because you never know when you're going to need it again. Canada did not have that energy. So we were just we were ripe for the picking. We're just like, we're rule followers. We don't push back. Everybody wants everybody to be happy, and everybody just do what you're told. And so as soon as this pandemic started and the rules started coming down, I immediately, wasn't that long after that, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, like right almost immediately after that, I said to my husband, like, this is too much. Like people are policing each other on the streets. It reminded me so much of being part of a cult again, where there are certain rules you have to follow, even if they're arbitrary, whether they make sense to you or not. Stand up, put the mask on, sit down, take the mask off. There's just all of these. In a church, you can be 50 or more, but at a birthday party with 10 people, you're going to get arrested. Like it was just, at work, you can be together, but at school you can't. And at restaurants, it was just so arbitrary. and you couldn't ask questions because then you were seen as a troublemaker. And also just the policing of each other. That was really uncomfortable to me too, because as a woman, as a Muslim woman, you're very policed by everybody all the time.
Yeah.
And I know that it was an extreme reaction. Like, you know, I know that I had the heebie-jeebies way before anybody else.
Right.
And I'm grateful that my husband, like, sort of, he wasn't like, oh, you're fine, everything's fine, you know, don't worry about it. But he met me where I was, and he was like, okay, you know, we'll do what you need to do. And so I had to get out of there. I had to get out, and we have been traveling since. I work fully online. He works fully online. Our daughter is online, and we just are going to different places where we're just running away from the pandemic, essentially. Right now we're in Cape Town, South Africa, which feels like, oh, you're crazy. Why would you be there? But it's an absolutely gorgeous, beautiful place. People are so chill here. There isn't that. It's really funny because when we first came here, people, when I asked them, like, aren't you worried about the pandemic? They're like, girl, you are in South Africa. That's like the sixth thing that's going to kill you in this country. Like,
right.
We're worried about like a mosquito with malaria.
That's facts. Yeah, malaria is kind of a big deal. It's like people sleep on malaria, but it actually is. People always ask me like, oh, if you weren't a survivor advocate, what would you do? I'd be like, probably fight malaria, because it's kind of a big deal. People don't realize, especially not in America.
Yeah.
But actually, Sam Harris was the one that got me. Was Sam Harris coming up again? Got me learning about that, which I think is cool. I think that's so interesting that you are taking that away from the pandemic. It really truly mirrors anyone that's lived under that type of, oppressive regime with an abuser. The North Korean defectors were speaking to the same language. And I also, not to lump myself in the same trauma category, but as someone who was free, lost my freedom as a trafficking victim, and then got my freedom again, I was trying to tell people, look, getting back your freedom is the hardest thing you'll ever do. You do not want to lose it. It's almost impossible to get it back. And when you put governments or tyranny or a religion or an abuser in that context, it really starts to, it's just so interesting that you have the same tone. I had the same tone. You know, the North Korean defectors, folks that had immigrated from China had the same tone. And it's not that I didn't care about the pandemic or take it seriously. It's just when you see some of those things pop up, it does, like you said, it gives you the heebie-jeebies. And I don't know about you, Yasmine, but looking back throughout my past, I wish I had trust in my gut more. And now when those things send off in the gut, you're like, oh no, I'm never falling for that again. Yeah. So I think that that's really, really interesting to hear you say that. And it does make a lot of sense. I do wonder what your take, so do you feel that folks that are super in this mindset, and it could go both left or right, with the extreme behavior, as someone who was a part of Islam and so close, one thing I don't know specifically, and I should ask, were you ever on the edge of becoming an extremist yourself?
No.
So you were never fully sold into it. Like you never bought what they were selling all the way to the point where you were willing to be extreme. I hope my language is correct. No,
yeah, your language is totally correct. I mean, I guess it depends on what you mean by the word extreme. So for me, I was never willing to like murder somebody. Okay. I was fully on board with hating Jewish people, hating non-Muslims, hating gay people, all of that stuff. I was an extremist, no doubt. I would call myself an extremist. If I met myself today, I would cross the street. Yeah. I wore niqab, covered myself head to toe in black, like even the gloves, even my eyes didn't show. I felt like there's so many different things that I felt, and there were so many different times, but as a Muslim, one of the things that you're taught is that it's a victim mentality, which I'm sure this isn't going to surprise you. The victim mentality is very strong. So everybody's out to get you. Everybody wants you dead. You have to fight. You have to fight for the community, for the ummah. You have to fight for the Muslims. You have to fight for Allah. Like you're in this constant battle. So you don't even really, and this is true too, like you're praying 5 times a day and every prayer is followed by other little prayers. And in between there, like there's so much to do. You're so busy all the time with the demands of worshiping that there's very little space for you to take a step back and actually think about what's going on. So there would be little moments where I'd be like, I don't know if the non-Muslims really hate me. But then it's like the barrage of like, yes, they do. They want you dead. Look at this evidence. Look at Israel. Look at the, and so it took, for me, it was a barrage of both taking a history of religions course in university. So that was me being intellectually bombarded. And then simultaneously 9/11 happened. And that's where I was being emotionally bombarded. And both of those things happened at the same time. And at the time I had a toddler, my little daughter, and there was a daycare at the bottom of those towers. And it was really, even though there's all these excuses like, oh, they were going to grow up to be non-Muslims and kill Muslims anyway. Oh, if they were innocent, they're going to go to heaven, so there's nothing to worry about. I'm like, you were willing to kill babies. Like you could have killed children. That was the plan. You didn't care that there was a daycare down there. And I couldn't get over that. And I couldn't get over how everybody just was so flippant about it and was celebrating this. Morale was through the roof. Everybody was so excited.
For the Muslim community. Or
because we're fighting the Americans.
Muslim community that you were in.
Yes, we're fighting the Americans. We're winning. Islam is winning. Allah's on our side. You know, there was just such a jubilation, such an elation around something so dark and sinister and horrifying. And you know, it took something like that to finally burst me out of my cognitive dissonance. When you asked me before,
for you, was it instant? Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, well, it was just when you asked me if I was an extremist, it's like I mentally was, even though I wasn't. I don't know how to explain it. Like you have doubts.
You were in a pattern of extremism, but you were in a pattern of a little bit of extremism, but even you had your limits, and when your limits were tested, you chose the right path. So, or a path that would not have harmed yourself or other people in the name of the religion.
Yeah, like there's obviously the man that I was forced to marry crossed that line very comfortably. And even though I understood why he crossed the line, because I understand how the religion works, it's kind of like when my mom threatened to kill me for taking off my hijab. So I understood her thought process. She's like, if you took off your hijab, then your next step is to not be a Muslim. So I have to kill you before you denounce Islam, because then Allah is going to punish me for eternity for having an infidel daughter. That's my responsibility to make you a good Muslim. And I failed. So I'm not going to burn for eternity over your mistakes. So I need to kill you before that happens. And as much as I understand her thought process and it makes sense to me and I get where it's coming from, and it's not like a crime of passion where she hates me, but she just truly felt like this is what she needed to do, that doesn't take away from the fact that it was really painful and still painful even decades later. Really, you know, how do you reconcile that? How do you deal with that? How do you get over the fact that the one person in the world that carried you in their womb, that it was like almost their biological imperative to love you and take care of you, chose this religion, you know? and was willing to sacrifice you. You know, you can, it's somehow you can carry both of these really, I don't know, I'm not excusing her, but I'm understanding where she's coming from. And you're so indoctrinated. You're so like a cyborg that I kind of get it. I kind of get how you can get to the point where you just have to do what you're told to do.
The human mind never ceases to amaze me.
Mm-hmm.
The things that, especially, I do understand what you're saying. I do, because only because in my life I've had those glimpses of extreme, like, Stockholm syndrome and trauma bonds. And once you can believe things that are not based in fact whatsoever. And when they're implanted in your head enough, it's almost like you're gaslit into believing something that's, I mean, that's what you're discussing is pretty much some of the most extreme, because I'm not a mother, but I wouldn't even hurt a cat that I like for that. You know, I mean, what are we talking about here? But you know, this is, that's what you're discussing is very extreme, but I do understand how you can understand why she got there, how she got there, what took her to that place where she would say that. Your mom's story is really interesting too. And that of course has a lot to play. Is your mom, how's your mom doing now? You talk to her ever?
No, I have not spoken to her in almost 20 years.
Do you feel ever that your life, I'm assuming you do all the time, do you think that your life is in danger for what you do and what you've said in public?
That's part of the reason why I'm so much more comfortable traveling around.
I bet.
Yeah. So now I teach at a university and I can teach online now. So the pandemic sort of propelled everything online.
Yeah.
Whereas before that, I was walking to campus and walking home, and I was in constant anxiety and stress.
There aren't a ton of women out there that are specifically beating the same drum that you are. There are some there, and they do great work. There are some, but I could see you being a really big target for a lot of people with a lot of money, because if what you say gets out and starts sinking into individuals like myself, you know, does somebody minding their own business want to check out a podcast? You popped up, listened to it, loved it. And then, kept following. And when I joined Twitter, I said, okay, I wanted, you were like on my short list of people to follow almost right away. All the people I had heard on podcasts that I liked, you were on the short list. But it is difficult. And I would love to talk about this a little bit. And we've kind of talked a little bit about this off camera before. It's hard for somebody like me. I don't want to step on toes talking about these issues. I don't want to sound Islamophobic. I don't want to, and also too, I'm not as educated in these issues. Like, how can someone like myself that doesn't want women to be oppressed if they don't need to be, how can someone like myself that likes to be a voice for marginalized and vulnerable populations, wants freedom for all? And I don't want to say that America completely has it down, because we're a whole hot mess too. Like, we're a whole hot mess right now. But I mean, I do have a platform. I can speak. What is the best way that someone like myself or anyone listening to this podcast can speak to, because I know you do a lot of work for LGBTQ plus in, those areas in the MENA regions as well, just speaking out from this, and also, free from hijab and all these things. How can someone like myself talk about this? I don't really care if people call me Islamophobic. I mean, one of my best friends that came on the podcast, second interview, is, Muslim. So they could try it. I don't really care. But I mean, for the average person, how can we speak about this and help you spread the message? without doing too much?
So I think that it's important to support women who are trying to share their stories, trying to express their traumas. This is why we started the hashtag Let Us Talk, was because exactly what you're describing here. From one end, we're being attacked by all of the mullahs and all of the extremists and fundamentalists that want us to shut up. And then on the other hand, we're getting attacked by the, white saviors and the, whatever, who want us to be quiet because they're calling us Islamophobics and bigots and deplatforming us. And so that whole thing with Let Us Talk started because I'm going to try and make this as short as possible, but basically there were some pediatric surgeons in Canada that were upset over the cover of a Canadian medical journal had a picture of a toddler in hijab. And so the pediatric surgeons got together and they wrote an article talking about their personal experiences with hijab, and then also how dangerous it is to be promoting something like this. And these are, like I said, pediatric surgeons. Like, this is what they do for a living, is take care of little children. And the article first got printed in this medical journal, and then it was rescinded after the Canadian Muslim groups got angry. They didn't like that in the article it said that the hijab kit is used as a tool of oppression. I mean, that's just a fact. That is just a fact. The fact that women are abducted in Afghanistan and disappear because they're not wearing hijab, the fact that women are thrown in prison in Iran because they're not wearing hijab, the fact that women get attacked with acid. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on about countries all over the world. Yeah. So the fact that it's used as
in countries, if you go on social media, in Iran, if you go on social media without hijab, you could, I mean, they imprison women. And we don't know really what happens in the prisons per se. It's not like here where you kind of have some oversight, which even here it's kind of wobbly. There, people just get disappeared, and this is just a regular youth person, just no hijab on their social media, and it's the end of their life. It's a pretty serious. I don't want to diminish how serious it is. It's pretty freaking serious.
Absolutely. You're absolutely correct. And that's it can be governments, like you mentioned, that are imprisoning these women, or it can be like what just recently happened in Iraq or in Pakistan or all over the Muslim world all the time, where it's honor killings. So it's the father or the brother that are killing their sister because she posted pictures of herself on social media without hijab on. So it is most definitely used as a tool of oppression currently, all the time, every day, and not just in the Muslim majority world. We've had a young girl in Canada, many young girls in Canada that were murdered by their families over hijab. One of the girls was 16 years old. And she was murdered by her father and her brother. They strangled her with the hijab that she refused to wear to give her for that message. So for this article to be rescinded and to be unpublished, and for them to post an apology saying, oh, we're sorry that we published this article that refers to hijab as a tool of oppression, that's what's prompted us to start this Let Us Talk. Like, we can't talk, not one side or the other. You're all suffocating us. And so when you ask me, what can we do? Please, help to release that valve. When you see a Free From Hijab post, like right now, there's this song called Cinderella's Dead, where a lot of girls are using it so in the song, essentially, it's a TikTok trend that has started. So in the song, she's basically talking about she was 19 and she got married and she did everything the guy wanted her to do. And then she forgot she was a badass. I forgot I was a bad bitch. And now Cinderella's dead. And I remembered who I am. And it's this really great, empowering song. And so many women have taken this song and they're showing themselves sort of in hijab, marrying the man they were told to marry, having the babies that they were told to have, and then boom, they come out of it like either wearing their cap and gown from graduating, or she's in a bikini in the water of some, you know, tropical paradise or whatever it is. They come out of their shell and they become whoever it was that was suffocated under there. When you see these kinds of posts, share them. That's really what it comes down to. Let these women know that you support them and that you believe in them. And also, it's important to, at the same time, send the message to all of these corporations and, you know, just media, movies, advertisements that are constantly throwing women in hijab as if it's like a benign fashion thing. And they're refusing to acknowledge the fact that it is a tool that is used, you know, it is an anti-woman tool that is used to kill women. Like we cannot just pretend that that doesn't exist. We're not talking about the past, we're talking about the current time. And so when we see things like that, it feels like such a betrayal. Such a betrayal that Western feminism, which is supposed to be like, that's what we look towards and say like, oh my God, look at these women, look how free they are. They're talking about free the nipple over here. And we're just trying to like free our face or free our hair, you know? And so when you look towards these women and then have the West turn around and put pictures of hijab on the cover of their magazines and all over their media everywhere, it's a slap in the face. It's a stab in the back.
I was going over with my best friend this morning in preparation for this interview, all the different religious groups and sects that do wear some type of head covering as women. And there have never been those types of models shown on Sports Illustrated, you know, with the Catholic, you know, we could go on and on and on. Many religions and sects cover in various ways. And there has been, I want to hit the right too, because I don't like either side particularly well, especially not right now. But why do you think the left has such a disconnect when it comes to feminism, women's rights, bodily autonomy, LGBTQ plus, when it comes to Islam? Why do they stop? Why do they have that cognitive dissonance? Why does it like only work into a point and then they can definitely turn their back when it's really, why do you think that is?
Brown skin. It's bigotry of low expectations. That's what it is. It's bigotry of low expectations. So what it is that's what it is.
I agree.
I mean, you're not going to see like that. You're not going to see like a Nike swoosh on Mormon underwear, right? You're not going to see that. You're not going to see them endorsing this and saying, yeah, this is something that we agree with, but they'll do it for hijab. And might I add, nobody has ever been imprisoned or killed or attacked with acid for not wearing Mormon underwear. You know, like they understand purity culture. They understand religious coercion. They understand feminism. They understand misogyny. They understand all of these concepts. They fucking invented those words. They understand everything. And the fact that when it comes to Islam or when it comes to Muslims, suddenly they just become stupid. I'm not buying it. It's a choice. At that point, your ignorance is a choice. And the reason why they're making that choice is because they're feeling like, if I say anything, like if I speak up, let me tell you, it was actually a quote that was said by Penn Jillette, you know, Penn and Teller. So he actually said once in a tweet, he said, if I criticize Christianity, the worst a Christian person is going to do is threaten to pray for me. But if I criticize Islam, a Muslim person is going to threaten to kill me and my family. So he's making the choice to step away from criticizing this. And he's somebody with power, like, right? He's somebody who is protected. And he's choosing not to criticize Islam because it's too volatile. They're gonna send him death threats and whatnot. So the average person is going to be feeling that tenfold, if not 100-fold, right? So there is the fear, like I just described before, the fear from both ends, the fear from the one end, from the Muslims. You know, everybody knows Charlie Hebdo. Everybody knows all of the trucks of peace and the stabbings all over the place and the suicide vests. Like, none of this is new information. Everybody knows that you know, Muslims all over the world are not only killing each other, but they're killing non-Muslims randomly, you know, innocent people all the time. We just had a killing in Israel the other day. And so they step away. They don't want to criticize it because it's dangerous in that way. And then it's also dangerous from the other side of the spectrum, where you have the same, you know, white saviors that are jumping up with Islamophobia. You're a bigot, you're a racist. Don't say that. That's not nice. You're going to hurt people's feelings. And so what ends up happening is things that really deserve to be called out and criticized are getting ignored. It's to the point that when Nazis are walking in the streets of Charlottesville with their, you know, fucking basically like pitchforks and talking about Jews will not replace us, it's all over the news everywhere. Everybody is talking about it. Everybody is just horrified. It just caused this huge, you know, tsunami of people condemning it. Yet in the streets of Toronto and London and every major city across the world, there's constantly those same, you know, they're coming from extremist Muslim groups that are incredibly, you know, supportive of the caliphate or against Israel. And they're also chanting those exact same things, but they're allowed to do it year after year after year after year with police escorts. So it's like their values just go out the window and they, yeah. So I don't know what to tell you. That's
it goes back to those core principles. I see it as a lack of core principles. Like I sort of, like I said in the beginning, I have my core principles, and once I work everything through that lens, it doesn't change. I mean, no matter how I feel emotionally, or no matter who's going to cancel me, I do choose my battles. I'll say that. I don't jump into every fight because, you know, it's hard out here. You can't be in every fight all the time. I don't have the energy for it. But so where do you think the right messes up? I have no idea how you're going to answer this question, or if they do it all. I don't know. I think that probably the war on terror probably wasn't helpful, but you would probably have a better understanding of that than I would, or I could be off.
No, I mean, I don't know which one were you talking about? Syria, you're talking about Iraq, you're talking about Afghanistan.
Yeah, no, it's just kind of like, you know, I don't know. I have so many different feelings about that, and that's probably for a whole different podcast. But I don't know. How does the right mess up? Because the left has this, like, you know, like we were just talking about, when it comes to LGBTQ, they just stop off at the pass. Every major corporation will have this big LGBTQ Pride Month, but when it comes to the MENA regions that don't accept those populations, their logo stays the same. And it's like, okay, you're not actually taking a stand, because if you actually cared about oppressed individuals, you would do it across the board and risk losing their business, period. Nobody wants to piss off Big Daddy Saudi Arabia. We could go on and on. We already know what it is. But, you know, I mean, so, but how does the right mess up? I see clearly how the left messes up. I don't know if the right messes up by stoking fear, and that sort of gives a knee-jerk reaction back from the left. I would love to know kind of what your take on that is.
Yeah, I think you're right in that. There's definitely that constant, you know, the pendulum swing and the two extremes kind of giving rise to the other side of the extremes, sort of giving them ammunition. And this is part of the reason why you don't want to speak up against even things that need to be criticized with Islam. You don't even want to talk about it because then you don't want to be seen as somebody coming from the extremist right who's like hateful, that just hates all Muslims or hates all, you know, brown-skinned people in general, or hates all Arabs, because those people exist. And so you don't want to be lumped in with them. And that's a natural, like, it makes sense. I understand that. But the problem is that people like us who exist in this nuanced space in between, we're drowned out because we're not salacious and, you know, saying things that are clickable or whatever. You know what I mean? Like they want extremist ideas because that's what's going to get attention. It doesn't get such, you know, when you're just saying rational things, or if you're like, let's take a look at this, let's have some civil discourse around this topic. That's not quite as
don't you feel though that folks just now, after being in the game for a couple minutes, I feel like there's a couple times where I could have been very extreme and, like, obviously I don't want to say grift because that's overused, but I could have gone a couple directions a couple times. The opportunity was there and I knowingly chose not to. I was like, you know what, I'm just going to stick to my guns and my principles. And yes, I would have had a short-term gain and probably, you know, whatever. But those types of folks don't have longevity. They're not somebody you go to that you know you could trust. You just go to them when you know you could fit a specific narrative. You're going to have your biases confirmed. That's how I feel. You're not going for substance or really a nuanced take. So those people are boring. That's why I love you. You're always around. I swear to God, every time I'm like looking, even on Yasmine, I would never tell you this before because we haven't had the opportunity, but there have been times where I didn't know my feelings on something. And when I saw you there giving your thoughts or even just asking a nuanced question, I was like, there she go. There she go. Cause you're there. I'm like, there she goes. And I love it because it just, I'm like, wow, she's someone that will consistently think, you know, or maybe add a nuanced opinion. I freaking love it. So
I just want to add there that has to do with having been part of a cult, that mob mentality, that tribalism. I hate it so much. And it immediately scares me because I don't want to be a part of that again. And people love it though, because we're social animals and they're comfortable in it and they prefer it. And I understand that. Like, I understand the basic need for wanting to be part of a tribe. So you're going to say what needs to be said. Yes, women can, you know, women have penises. Yes, no, there's no such thing. I don't know what the difference is between a woman and a trans woman. People will say whatever needs to be said so that they can be accepted by the group, so that they can feel like they're part of this tribe. It makes them feel comfortable. For me, it's the opposite. It makes me feel claustrophobic. I know what it's like to be part of a tribe like that. And I know that it's very conditional love. And the moment you step out of line,
you just nailed it. Yep.
Yeah. And I can't be in that space again. I can't be in that space because I want to always be able to, you're never allowed to think critically. Like, I was never allowed to think critically growing up. I would get in trouble for it. They said it was like the devil whispering in your ear if you ever tried to think. That's what critical thinking was, the devil whispering in my ear. And so I can't, it's like what you just said earlier in our conversation. Once you have your freedom, it's that you know how hard it was to get it. And I'm not going to fight that fight again. I don't have the energy for it. I won't survive it. And so you're not getting it. You're not going to get 1 inch of my freedom ever again. I'm going to hang on to it, even if it means that I die holding on to it. I'm happy to do that rather than give up any bit of my freedom again. And that includes my freedom of thought. And so if I'm going to be part of a tribe, knowing that tribe is going to insist from me that I toe the party line, then I can't do it. In fact, I was asked to be a member of parliament in one of Canada's major political parties, and it went really far. In fact, I was like Stephen Harper, who was like a very popular Canadian conservative. His wife and I were in conversation for so long, like I was totally going to do this. And then at some point, somebody said to me, but you have to make sure that you are a party player or something like that. She's like, you have to make sure that you don't publicly something like step out of line, or you have to toe the line. And I was like, I am done. I gotta go. Like, I cannot.
And this is what I always try to explain to folks. Eventually you will compromise your morals to do something, or you might, as us say it different than morals. But for me, I feel like eventually I will have to compromise my morals and carry water for something that I'm vehemently against.
Yeah.
There's no
I don't know if that would ever
it.
happen, but I wasn't willing to take the risk. Yeah.
It would have happened the first week. You can't, there's no way in politics. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a doomer about it, but so when you see folks in this cult-like mentality, the Stockholm syndrome, the trauma bonds with the political party, religious, an abuser, you look at it. Yeah, I love your way of thinking about it, that's conditional and that love is conditional. I think that's a really interesting takeaway today because it's so true. How do you think we break people free? What was that experience like for you? Was it the 9/11 experience, knowing that they would have killed a daycare full of children? Was that the moment for you? Or was there a different moment, or was it a series of moments?
It was a series of moments. So I would say that when I was in that history of religions course and I was thinking critically about Islam for the first time, my professor is from Lebanon. He grew up Christian in Lebanon, but he's Arab. So we kind of understood my context. And I got really close with him and I really trusted him, and we spoke Arabic together. So I was, because as a Muslim, you're very on guard all the time because everybody wants to kill you and everybody hates you. And so he was, I didn't feel on guard with him. Like, I got comfortable with him. And then he's like slowly showing me things like, have you read this? Did you see this? Let's talk about this. And so it was a very a non-confrontational way of me to finally start looking at this religion. And then, of course, 9/11 happened as well. So there was all of that. But then there was also just this really, really deep, innate desire for freedom that I had had in me my whole life. And I always suppressed it because it was a waste of time. It's like wanting to fly. You could waste your time wanting to fly, but you don't have any wings and you're not going to fly. And so you have to just accept it. You have to submit. The definition of the word Islam is submission. And Ayaan Hirsi Ali, when she was on Joe Rogan, she told the story, which is the story of millions of us when she told it. She said that you get to this point where you're as a kid, as a young girl, especially if you have brothers, you do a lot of fighting, you do a lot of pushing. Well, how come he doesn't have to? Well, why do I have to? Well, da, 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 da. And then you kind of reach a point, and the way she described it, she said, like, the women around her kind of said it to her in a compassionate way. They were like, listen, Ayaan, just stop fighting. You got to just accept it. This is the way it is. And once you accept it, you'll be happy. As long as you keep pushing and as long as you keep fighting, you're going to continue to be unhappy. So just stop for your own good. We all stopped and we're all fine now too. And it's like, that is the moment. That is the moment right there. And some of us can accept our fate and just never think about it again. And some of us can't. Some of us will still have that fire in us. It gets put out, sometimes it's just like tiny little embers, but it flames back up again. And I don't know what the difference is, but it's like a fight, flight, or freeze response. Some of us freeze and we just stay frozen, and others, if the fight is there, and we'll fight, or we will flee. Like we'll find something in us will push us out of it. And the circumstances have to be right. Like, it's all about the butterfly effect at this point. This has a lot to do with just other people that are around you, luck, you know, so many different things. If it weren't for the, you know, the flap of a butterfly's wing somewhere, I could have been dead years ago, many times. And it is terrifying for me to think about how many times in my life I could have not made it. Like the fact that I made it, that's why I started my organization, Free Hearts, Free Minds, is because of that sort of survivor's guilt. Is, you know, I made it, and I'm born and raised in Canada. So let alone a woman in Saudi Arabia or in Pakistan or in Sudan or, you know, in Egypt or anywhere out of like 50 Muslim majority countries, how much harder it would have been for her, or it is for her, than it was for me. And I feel like I barely survived. So yeah, I don't even remember what the question was. I think I just went off on a tangent.
No, you're all good. I'm like super focused just for me. I have this weird thing, like, how do you break mass Stockholm syndrome? I'm like super obsessed with
I
it,
don't think you can.
But I think you have your story nailed exactly what my suggestion has been. And I would love to talk to different people from all around the world, get their perspective, but plant seeds. You had someone in your life that will slowly, Tiffany, in a gentle way, earn trust by being trustworthy and probably very consistent, and then slowly planted seeds, which is the same thing I say with if someone's leaving a trafficking abuser, anything like that, you know, whatever it is, you slowly
you have to do it.
Earn trust. Well, yes, ultimately it's the individual's choice to leave, whatever it is that they're leaving, because forcing someone to leave also, I think, has an adverse, that doesn't work. That's actually, to me, it actually makes it worse. That's how I find it. It makes it worse. It makes that trauma bond worse. One thing that I think was really interesting, and then I want to talk about your work before we go, because I don't want to leave that out because it's freaking awesome. So before we went recording for the podcast, I had asked you, how do you identify, do you identify as a survivor of domestic violence? Because I didn't want to put words in your mouth, or sexual assault. Just in listening to your story a few times, you did face abuse. And I think you had said some things before we went, live in the recording that I think were really, really powerful. I don't know if that's a conversation that is being had enough, how much in Islam it is maybe normalized to physically abuse and sexually assault spouses. And not for nothing, there's also some cultures from within there where it's normalized to rape young boys, where it's I'm going to get kicked off YouTube today. I can already feel it. Where it's normalized to, that's all right. That's why I'm set up on the other platforms, but where it's normalized to rape young boys, where it's, normalized to take child brides, FGM normalized. There are so many things about this. And I think, it was, I was interested, why don't you make that more of your platform, talking about your story with those issues?
I think that I like to focus the things that I talk about on something that I can feel is possible, is practical, is manageable. And that's why a lot of it is free from hijab day, because I feel like it's your body, it's a piece of cloth. Somebody's telling you to put it on your body. If you decide to take it off your body, like nobody else is involved in this decision except for you. Whereas if I were to start talking about marital rape, which is, of course, a huge issue. And there are women that are trying to fight it, like in Egypt, women recently were trying to criminalize, wasn't even marital rape, it was domestic violence, like even just beating your wife. Can we make that criminalized, please? Egypt, this is supposedly one of the more progressive countries.
Iraq
where the
was
statistics
recent too.
show,
I mean, these are like new, like there's not even laws, like it's still okay.
yes,
Like not even
yes,
like, in fact,
yes,
a lot of times the women that are being, if you even try to
yes,
speak about it, you are then thrown in. It's like opposite
correct.
world. So yeah,
Yes.
that's why I get what you're saying. I think that that's very valid. I understand, because I've had those things as well, where it's like, let me reach for something tangible and not try to fix the world. Just take one little baby step at a time. So that makes sense. I just, your story as a survivor, domestic violence and other issues is pretty, I mean, I would call it extra. I mean, from what I've heard you express in other interviews, is what I would consider extreme life or death. So when Yasmine says she almost died, I mean, this is like real deal, almost died. It's a miracle that you're alive. And I'm grateful for what you do. And it would be interesting to see maybe if there would be more allyship from within, some of the survivor space, or the cases that I've served where individuals are Muslim are very difficult, especially with domestic violence. It's hard to get those, it's hard to make a safety plan. A lot of times the church and the family are so surrounding this victim. The children are, it's very complex and very nuanced. And I hope in my lifetime we can make a little bit of progress. So please let folks know what you're doing now and how they can support you. And of course, check out our book, but talk about Free Hearts, Free Minds for a second, and No Hijab Day. # No Hijab Day.
So as I was saying, Free Hearts, Free Minds was born out of this feeling of, so I express it in my book where I say, I know the hell of being born in a Muslim family. I know the double hell of being born a girl into a Muslim family. And I can't imagine the triple hell of being born a lesbian girl in a Muslim family. So that's the other part of Free Hearts, Free Minds. So the Free Hearts is for the LGBT community, and the Free Minds are for the ex-Muslim free thinker community. And both groups of people in the Muslim majority world are persecuted or even executed. So when you were talking before about the rainbow flags and all of these major companies, they're doing business with a country that will execute people for being gay. So even if you were to change your profile picture to a rainbow, it's not really going to be that helpful when you're at the same time simultaneously murdering people for how they were born. So it really came from my own, like I was writing my book, and I was constantly being contacted by people all over the world who related to my story. And I started to really feel this sense of responsibility. I felt compelled to speak up and to do something, because they were always saying to me, you're so lucky that you're in a Western country. You're so lucky that you're free. And it gave me a perspective, like it made me start to realize, like, yeah, I am the privileged one in this scenario. And so I have to, I have to do what I can to help people who are in the same situation that I was in, and even so much worse. So what our organization does is it helps through group support sessions, people who have denounced Islam, and quite often people have denounced Islam and who identify as part of the LGBT community. And it has been, this is part of sort of answering your question before too. It's fulfilling, it's rewarding. I'm doing something. You know, if you go to our website and you click on testimonials, you can read stories from people who we have helped, people who were feeling, you know, like there was nothing left to live for, and are now feeling empowered and are looking towards a bright future. And so often I'm getting messages from people who attained their dreams, who were able to get out of the bad situations that they were in. And it was all because of Free Hearts, Free Minds, giving them that space where they could feel comfortable, where they could express their views and not be demonized for it. You can't share with a therapist in Egypt that you're gay or that you don't believe in Allah, you know, like you're taking your life into your own hands. And so just empowering people to know that, you know, we're here for you, we support you, and giving them the tools that they need to empower themselves has allowed people to, it has completely transformed lives. And so that's my work with Free Hearts, Free Minds, which is, I'm so, so grateful to have a group of therapists working with me who I absolutely am. I just love them. I'm so grateful to them. I appreciate them so much. None of this could be possible without them. And, you know, so that's my organization. So if your listeners could go to freeheartsfreeminds.com, and please click on the testimonials and just read some of the stories from these people, share their stories. Even if you don't share, just know their stories. Just know that there's people like this in the world, and connect with them, you know, let their stories go into your heart.
And for my listener
base, what they're
base,
trying to say to you.
For my listener base, I just want to return back to the fact that a lot of these individuals are survivors. Like these are folks that not all, but many of whom are also survivors. So, you know, the people that hang around me like to support survivors. Just go check out a different perspective from a different part of the world, or just anything like that. This is just a different perspective. And then maybe hear different types of survivor stories, you know, on my feed all the time. We always have different survivor stories. This is just a different perspective. Maybe not all are survivors, but a decent portion.
They are all survivors. They are all survivors of religious trauma, that's for sure. And like you talked before about how normalized violence is, domestic violence. So like kids, it's in the hadith to beat your children. It's so normalized. And so they are all survivors of different kinds of abuses. And if they're, anyway, so definitely. And the other thing is Free from Hijab, and that is a hashtag that I use to support other women who want to remove the hijab, but are in situations where they are being ostracized, they're being demonized, they're being, quite often they lose their friends and family. There's anyway, there's so many stories I want to tell you, but we're running out of time. But if you go to Free from Hijab and just read some of the stories of some of those women, watch their videos, look at their pictures, it's just shocking how removing a piece of cloth off your head can make such a life difference. Like people, it's hard to express to people how it's not a piece of cloth, it's handcuffs. It's handcuffs that are being put on this woman. And when she stands up and says, I refuse to wear this, she's claiming her power in an incredibly patriarchal, misogynist society, and that is scary. And so they will beat her down and keep her subordinate as much as they can. So for when a woman does that, it is just phenomenal. And the other thing that I wanted to plug was the conversations that I have with women that I find to be incredibly motivating and inspiring, and that's Forgotten Feminists. So again, you can go to my website, Forgotten Feminists, or on my website, yasminemohammed.com, or on YouTube, find Forgotten Feminists and listen to those stories of those women. Some of them fell in love with some charismatic Muslim man who convinced them to marry him and have 4 children, and then decides that he also wants to have a second wife, and all sorts of crazy stories. But these women are all survivors, and that's what I like to focus on too. Like, just keep it as positive as I possibly can, and motivating as I possibly can, and let other women know it's possible. You know, she did it when these were her circumstances, and you can do it too.
I love that. I love that very much. It's very good what you're doing. I think that the history books will remember you very kindly as someone that spoke out. You know, we need those powerful feminist leaders right now. And I'm zooming real close to feminism. I'm telling you, I'm like this close to identified as a feminist, but I'm not ready quite yet. But you know, we need those women that are going to stay. I think it's awesome, and I truly believe that the history books are going to remember you well. I'm always going to be grateful for you for just opening up my eyes to a different perspective that I had never heard before. And then from there, I was able to meet more individuals that speak on these issues, and it kind of really opened up my eyes. Like, oh, okay. Do you have to go in 7 minutes? Because I have one more question. But if you don't,
go ahead. Yeah.
I'm dying just
it.
because I'm being a nosy Nancy. This is like I wish I had asked this, but I'm just being nosy. And, you know, so when the Canadian version of the CIA, came to you and said, your husband's part of, is an Al-Qaeda operative. What did you think? Like, what went through your mind? I can't even imagine. Like, were you like, holy Toledo? Did it not surprise you?
I think that at that time, I was so a shadow of my former self. I was not even, I was so diminished. I was so dehumanized. I was so an extension of him by then that I forgot who I even was. So when they told me that, it scared me into remember, like, okay, you were really complacent. Like, you just look what you did. You now have a daughter and you're married to this man. And he was talking about like going to Peshawar and being a mujahid. And I didn't really think of it as real, because Muslims talk like that all the time, right? Like, oh, there's gonna be a caliphate and we're gonna take over, and then, you know, the Muslims will rule the world. And so it was just like, it's kind of like, I guess, if you're raised Christian and they're always talking about Armageddon. And then it's like, you don't expect it to actually ever happen. So for me, like, that was the moment where I was like, whoa, this is real then. Like, you're actually CSIS officers telling me that he really is a terrorist. And so that made me feel like I need to get myself and my daughter out of this situation as soon as possible. So that kind of like, that was like the embers that I was talking about, that just like threw some lighter fluid on those embers. And I just, you know, came to. So it was, that's what it felt like. It just felt like coming to. Yeah.
Wow. You've survived a lot. What type of advice would you give to anyone that's maybe in an abusive relationship, that's thinking about leaving? Maybe that has to do it in silence, because your story is freaking intense. It's powerful. But in that part of your story is you sitting here today with the confidence. I mean, like you just described to me, you were a shell of your former self. That you used words like diminish, you know, you wouldn't even recognize you. Earlier in this interview, you said you would have crossed the street because you were just not the type of person you wanted to be around. How did you get from being a survivor of multiple things, domestic violence, sexual assault, occult so many things. How did you get there to the woman that you are today? And what advice would you give to any survivors or individuals that are going through something extremely difficult to start to build that up and to become who they truly can be if they want it?
So for me, I had my daughter, who I always tell her that she saved my life. So those core values that you've mentioned a few times, those core values for me came from me deciding I want to be a role model for her.
Mm.
I want to be the person. I want to be somebody that she looks up to. So I want to, you know what I mean? Like, I want to be that person. And so I had to really, step by step, is a slow process. Eliza, all those questions you had, like, slowly, that's the answer, very slowly. But you just have to step by step choose who you want to be, what your core values will be, and then fake it till you make it. Like, just decide, you know, I will be this person. I think that my survival story is very chaotic, and I did not by any means plan anything. I was in survival mode for like 20 years. The only thing I really planned was my education, because I didn't really, because that's very, you know, you can't help but plan it. But I think that what is really important for me to tell people now is to plan carefully. So plan for your safety, plan for your financial independence, plan those things, because 9 times out of 10, when we get contacted from a woman who is in Saudi Arabia in an abusive relationship or wanting to get away from her father or whatever, like, it's like they are willing to, they just want to go. It doesn't matter. They're going to take the first plane that they can get to get anywhere, and then they'll deal with it. And I know that feeling of, I just need to get out of here and then I'll deal with it. But if you can, and this is what Free Hearts, Free Minds does, one of our main things that we do is to help people step back, breathe, meditate, and plan, and make sure that you have your ducks in a row before you start taking steps forward. Especially since, as an ex-Muslim in a Muslim majority country, it is life or death. You know, it was life or death for me, but it was my mom. She's the only one trying to kill me. And, you know, whatever Assam people he sent around. But, you know, if you're in a country where the entire society, the entire government, the whole system is rigged against you, you need to be very, very careful taking your steps. So yeah, that's what I would say. I would say plan, and believe in yourself. When you mentioned trusting that voice, trusting your gut, I cannot tell you how important that is. I think that might be the most important thing.
That's why I brought it up. I agree.
Yeah, we're just told, we're so often, we silence that part of ourselves. We're taught to silence that part of ourselves. And we have to listen to it again and allow it to, you know, give it the importance that it deserves. And that's huge. That was really big for me. So yeah, there's a lot of answers to that, but I would just say, you know, trust in yourself, plan. And life is so short. Don't forget how short life is. That's another thing. Because you're going to look back and think, I regret wasting so many years in purgatory, too scared to jump. Because it's your life. Is you get one of them and it's short, and don't waste it.
Do you regret spending so much time of your life in purgatory? Because if you hadn't, you wouldn't be serving individuals now that need support. Or maybe you would have. Probably, I don't know. It could have gone any way. If you had to do it over again, would you choose the same path and end up exactly where you are now, or would you do something different?
I can't say that I would do anything different because I have my daughter. And so I would do it all again. If I could have had her without having to go through all that, there was some way of making that happen. Yeah, so in my book, I talk about Mr. Fabro, who wrote the foreword to my book when I was like 12, 13 years old. That moment when he told me that he would have taken me in, and my life would have gone in a completely different direction, and I could have avoided so much trauma. Yeah, like my life would have been very different, I think. And I don't think I would have been doing what I'm doing today. In fact, I'm sure I wouldn't be, because I would want nothing to do with this world. And I wouldn't want to talk about it. I wouldn't want to think about it. I'd want to just forget all about it. But the reason why I'm immersed in this now is because I simply can't. It's too much of my life. It's just, yeah, it's just something I feel compelled to do more than choosing to do. Yeah.
I get it. I really do. Yasmine, I really, really appreciate you coming on my podcast. I really do. I think your story is very powerful. I highly encourage folks get your book, listen to other podcasts that you've done, because there's other podcasts where you go more in depth about your the step-by-step of your story. And I don't want folks to miss that. But I don't know. I just kind of wanted to talk to you. I didn't want to have you just relive play-by-play of everything. I mean, it gets kind of boring. And I think that your experience and lending your experience to some of the more current things that are going on, like, hey, I lived under an oppressive regime. This isn't good. I'm noticing these things popping up. That's important too. So I think I'm glad that you've told your story multiple times. I definitely want folks to check out your book. I definitely want them to check out the other interviews that you did. You did a great one with Bridget Fetisi as well. Love her. I did one with her too. Super cool. But and just to support you, give you a follow on your social media. Why don't you shout out your social media before you go? And then I will end with a little doodad that I need to say to hype myself up. But thank you again, Yasmine. I think you're very brave. And I think the history books will remember you very kindly.
I feel the exact same way about you. I mean, this. As soon as I was, if I'm listen to you in interviews, or if I'm reading your tweets, like I just immediately felt this connection. There's something about us that have this shared trauma. We find each other. Our souls get each other. So many times as I was talking, I see your eyes light up and your head nod, and I know that like we don't have to have gone through step by step the exact same situations, but we have been through so many of these things that other people just will not understand, and the importance of us supporting each other, because very few other people are going to get what we've been through. And when you were talking with Bridget about wanting to support other people who have been through what you have been through, and at that moment where you're like, I can't be Oprah, like I have to, you got to do what you can. Like I felt that, like that is that you and I and Bridget too have that same kind of just gratitude to the universe that you made it out alive. And there's nothing you want more than to reach your hand out and to support others who are going through what you are going through, because you know what it feels like to feel so isolated and so scared. And you don't ever want another human being to feel that way again. And, you know, I absolutely adore you. And I'm so, so grateful to have met you. I mean, Twitter's a cesspool, but at times like this, I'm
I
so,
find the gems. I
so
find the
grateful.
gems.
You do. Yeah.
I find the gems. But like I said, I had wanted to follow you anyway, because I had already been, following your work. But I think that's a testament to your strength, is that, I'm nobody, not even on social like that, sitting on the farm. But I think when you started speaking, and it could just be because I come from trafficking situation and domestic violence, but when you started speaking, I was really listening, and I thought that you always portrayed, spoke about things in a way. But I think that's a testament to your work and your reach, that I was just, I always listen to Sam Harris at night because it's a great podcast to sleep to, it's such a calm voice. And you had always stood out. And I was like, okay, she has something that people need to talk about and hear, and be talking and hear it, and that she's talking about it and need to hear it. And so and Bridget does have that, I think what all three of us kind of have in common, we're not like so much on the victim energy. We just kind of want to
survivor energy.
Yeah, survivor energy. Just kind of be around, meet people where they're at. But I think you hit the nail on the head again. Gratitude. That's the difference between the victim and the survivor. I'm so freaking grateful to be alive. That's why I wake up in the morning, do my thing. It's like you said, it's like I don't even have a choice. It's like I'm so grateful. My cup is so full of gratitude, I spill over, and that's where you see some of the other stuff. So I totally get that. Tell people where they can follow you on social, and shout out the organization one more time.
So the organization is Free Hearts, Free Minds, and I am on Instagram, on Facebook, and on Twitter, all under Yasmine Mohammed. Oh, and locals as well.
That's right. Local. Spell Yasmine Mohammed for anybody that's listening.
Sure. Yasmine is Yasmine, and Mohammed is Mohammed.
Perfect. Well, thank you again. I'm going to do all my stuff now. If you want to log off, that's fine. If you want to stay and listen to me do my whole spiel, that's fine too. I want to thank everybody that tuned into this podcast today. Yasmine is absolutely incredible. I hope that you follow her on just everything. like she said, the main thing, support. I say the same thing about survivors of human trafficking too. Like, just retweet them. They have a specific experience, just something, just a like, a retweet, that goes a long way. Not just of me, of other individuals that have faced different types of abuse or trauma. I think she hit the nail on the head repeatedly during this interview. For anyone that's listening here, I want to let you know that I also have a locals community. That's like probably the number one way to support me. That's also how you get signed up to my email list. If you want to sign up for a free subscription, you're signed up for my email list automatically. It's Eliza, Eliza.locals.com. Eliza.locals.com. Also, too, if you want to contribute to me at all, my podcast is not sponsored right now. I have no advertisers. So if you want to help me keep this whole operation going, that would be freaking awesome. I would love it. Just drop me a couple bucks. Send me some coffee money, some gas money. The other thing I want to say, too, is that I am speaking at this year's 2022 Freedom Fest. It would be better if I had it memorized when the actual Freedom Fest was happening, what dates, but I'm not that together today. But needless to say, if you want to save money on your ticket, come see me at Freedom Fest. Literally everybody cool is going to be there. Everybody cool is going to be speaking there. I'm pretty much the lowest person on the totem pole. But if you want to see me speak, you can use promo code ELIZA50, ELIZA50, and you can save money on your ticket. I'm going to break this down for you. Go to Freedom Fest website. It's going to be in Las Vegas this year. You got a couple months to plan. But basically what I'm going to tell you is this. If you don't get tickets for Freedom Fest, you're going to spend the week that I'm at Freedom Fest with heavy FOMO by looking at all of my Freedom Fest posts. And you're going to be like, dang, I wish I had gone to Freedom Fest. So buy your ticket early. You'll save money when you buy the ticket early. Plus, you'll get my promo code ELIZA50. And I think that's about it for today. I just want to thank you so much to everybody that has been listening to this podcast, for everybody that's been supporting it. It's been kind of hard getting it off the ground. And I've appreciated the new set of challenges, and I've really appreciated the support. So with that, I will see you back here next time.